Tonight we are at our final forum after having done 5 of them. This is the 6th, and this is for Nevada County Assessor. And I would like to thank the candidates for being here. I also want to thank our media representatives, Sarah from the Union and Pascal from UBNet. And a shout out to Nevada County Media, who is streaming this live and also providing a recording of it for viewing later on. This forum is brought to you as a result of a grant that the League of Women Voters got from Nevada County. That grant is called, here you go, the Nevada County American Rescue Plan Act Allocation for Community and Economic Resiliency. And what we call it is the Resiliency Grant. And it was given to several nonprofits, many nonprofits in Nevada County to help them get back on their feet after a rough couple of years. So we are appreciating that. We're appreciating that funding because it actually is the reason why we are able to bring this to you. If you are happy to be able to watch these forums, if you appreciate it, please consider supporting the League. Especially consider becoming a member. And our website has membership information. You could also make an easy donation on the website as well if you'd like to support this work. So I am about ready to introduce our moderator tonight. He is working with the candidates right now. They're doing the flip of the coin to decide who speaks first and who speaks last. I just want to remind people that we will be back again for the general election, and those forums will probably start in September. So prepare for those. Our moderator tonight is Jeff Pettit. He is a longtime member of the League of Women Voters, former captain in the Sheriff's Department, and Jeff, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thank you, Janice. Good evening and welcome to the Candidates Forum for the Nevada County Assessor, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Western Nevada County. My name is Jeff Pettit and I will be moderating tonight's program. So let's go over some ground rules that will help us get the most out of our time together tonight. And I'm going to kind of go through these pretty quick because I know we did get a late start. So please remember, we maintain a neutral environment, meaning nothing candidate or issues related may be shown during the forum. Please refrain from any outbursts. In other words, please do not cheer, boo, hiss, stomp, or anything of the sort. Audience, we also ask that you hold your applause until the end of the forum to allow the candidates as much time as possible to express their views on the issues. And please take a moment to silence your cell phones if you have them. Audience questions should be neatly written, or should be written neatly on some cards. Will our card readers raise their hand, or our card runners raise our hands? So if you do need a card, just raise your hand, and one of our card runners will bring you a card. You can write down your question. We ask that only one question per card, and then raise your hand, and they will pick up your card. I also ask that you please write as legible as possible, and to keep your questions as short as possible. We will be reviewing them during the event tonight. This evening, we are presenting the candidates vying for the office of the Nevada County Assessor. The role of the Assessor's Office is to locate taxable property, identify ownership, and establish value for the tax assessment rules. There are 2 candidates currently running, Rolf Kleinhans and Gerald Bouchard. In addition to the audience written questions for these candidates, we have a media panel who will pose verbal questions directly. Our media panel are from UBNet, Pascal Fussholler, and from the Union, Sarah Jackson. Thank you both for being here. Candidates will have 2 minutes apiece for opening and closing statements, and they will have 1.5 minutes apiece to answer questions. If a candidate would like a rebuttal, we ask that they raise their hand, and 1 additional minute will be allowed to both candidates. Candidates will rotate in their order of answering questions. We flipped a coin a few minutes ago to determine who will go first, and I'll call for the last question around 6:35. We have 2 timers tonight, and they will ensure that candidates stay within the time allotted. Timers, cards, can you please show the cards that you'll be holding up? So the yellow card indicating the 30 seconds, and obviously the red time's up card means just what it says. We do ask when the red card comes up that you can finish your thought, but please no run-on sentences to try to keep everything going. We thank you for your attention and your readiness to listen and learn. So now it's time to meet our candidates. Based on the coin flip, our first candidate to give opening statements will be Gerald Bouchard. Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you. I want to thank the sponsorship of the League of Voters for this forum. Microphone.
Hold on.
want to thank the sponsorship of the League's volunteers for this forum. I'm personally here tonight to strengthen and participate in our community's cares and concerns. You are to judge the candidate's knowledge, skill, stamina, and patience for fulfilling the assessor's role of the next four-year term. I have honesty, integrity, reliability, experience, and the knowledge needed as an assessor. The position of assessor is one of, if not the most important positions in the county. Assessors do not set or collect taxes. The assessment values derived from the assessor's office are used by the county tax collector to collect huge amounts of taxes nowadays. These monies are apportioned to tax support agencies throughout the county and are generally the lifeblood of every such agency recipient or beneficiary. This is why the assessor has always been independently elected in California by voters of the county, so that the position is not subject to pressure from governing bodies of any county, city, school, or special tasking district to increase the assessments in order to generate them more revenue, which then, of course, directly affects the taxpayer property owner. The assessor works for all voters and property owners in the county. The assessor's trained staff is charged with making the assessment, not the assessor personally. The assessor is, however, charged as to the preparation of fair and correct valuations based on independent, objective market standards. The assessor's duties are nonpartisan, so one should not treat or vote it as a partisan by any past or current party membership, nor should any candidate accept a party's endorsement. By unanimous votes, the County Board of Supervisors several times in fulfilling two distinct appointments to nonpartisan positions. I am a registered nonpartisan voter since 2007. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kleinhans.
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Rolf Kleinhans. Nevada County needs an assessor with hands-on private sector experience in management, finance, and valuing your property. Working for the county over the last 10 years, I have a deep understanding of how the county functions. I know how to get things done in both the private and the public sector. As assessor, I will provide needed leadership and bring many years of valuation and management experience to the office. And I pledge to treat you, the taxpayer, as a valued customer. I earned 2 degrees from UCLA, a bachelor's degree in geography, ecosystems analysis, and a master's in business administration concentrating in real estate and finance. I hold an active real estate broker's license and currently work for Nevada County as the sheriff's chief fiscal and administrative officer. My education and work experience in Southern California allowed me to attain the position of vice president for the real estate investment division of the Prudential Insurance Company of America. I had management and project development experience with many types of real estate. My work required valuing and reporting on those market values. I had a staff of 200 people and sole responsibility for the creation, implementation, and accountability of operating budgets in excess of $80 million annual revenues. After moving here in 1995, my work included real estate brokerage, development, consulting, and valuation. I have in-depth knowledge of valuation processes and market impacts on values. I've loved living here with Karen and raising our 3 sons. I've served our community by volunteering for many local organizations, including the Economic Resource Council, and enjoyed coaching youth soccer, volleyball, and basketball. Currently, I serve at the state level as president of the California Association of Public Administrators, Public Conservators, and Public Guardians. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move into some of our questions, and to get us started on the questions portion of the forum, we will begin with a media question. Candidates, you will have a minute and a half piece to answer, and Mr. Kleinhans, you'll have the first question. The first media question comes from Yubanet.
Good evening, candidates.
The question is to me, is that correct?
No, sir, you will answer second.
Thank you.
Okay, so question. The assessor's office, of course, works with a lot in the building department because we have several people who send us a question related to that. Basically, people take out a permit to get an addition to their house, a standby generator. The work is inspected, it's done, inspected. After a while, there is a letter that comes from the assessor's office saying, hey, you took out a building permit. Did you do the work? And if so, send us an invoice so that we can adjust your property tax. In your opinion, is there a more sensible or more automated way to handle that so that there's not one extra step? Could there be more integration with building and assessor?
Yes, I believe there could be. We have a pretty sophisticated IT department here at Nevada County, and what would come to my mind is the ability to put those finalized permits into SharePoint. And SharePoint is a common database that the county can use, and you can make it so either any department can access that or restricted people within a department can access that. So they could access that information directly. What would be missing in that case is the value, because the permit has nothing to do with the value of the work done. It just has to do with what you're asking to be done. Let's say you had a 10,000 kilowatt generator or a 5,000 kilowatt generator. Those are obviously different in price, the larger one usually being more expensive. So you wouldn't be able to put price in there unless you got that information, and that's usually going to come from the homeowner, not necessarily the contractor that installed it. But you can facilitate greater communication electronically, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Bouchard.
Section 7510.
And could you turn on your microphone? Thank you.
Section 7510 provides that the assessor must appraise new construction at its full cash value on the date of new construction is completed. It is the best move for the permit holder to submit his permit showing the value, and usually you have to put that down on the permit as to what the generator cost. That way should be no question. Otherwise, the assessor's office is going to have to appraise, come out, and do their own opinion of value. It's quite simple. That's my answer.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, the next is going to be a question posed by our audience. Mr. Bouchard, you'll be the first to ask and answer this question. So please, if you will, explain the primary responsibilities of the assessor and explain how your personal skills and abilities enabled you to be an effective assessor.
If you'll give me 1 second, please. The assessor has many functions to do, and what you're talking about is one of them. Would you repeat the question again, please?
Sure. Please explain the primary responsibilities of the assessor and explain how your personal skills and abilities have enabled you to be an effective assessor.
As I just finished saying, I'll add a codicil to that I have done up to 134 units of construction for condominiums. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for 8 years. I understand zoning. I understand all of the intricacies of building because we also, through my company, have offered to do construction supervision. And that's basically my answer.
Thank you. Mr. Kleinhans.
One more time, please. One more. Thank you.
Okay. Please explain the primary responsibilities of the assessor and explain how your personal skills and abilities enable you to be an effective assessor.
Well, the primary responsibility of the assessor is to assess all the taxable property in the county. From that, they prepare an assessed roll. That assessed roll, when finalized, goes to the State Board of Equalization for completion. Ultimately, that assessed roll, all those values, are then apportioned and charged the tax rates applicable to the type of property that comes there. My skill sets include fairly significant financial analysis capabilities, lots and lots of management, because the most important asset you're going to have in the assessor's office is the staff. And so I do know how to motivate a staff. I've motivated significant improvements in our financial systems at the sheriff's office, and in the past experiences that I've had building high-rises, regional malls, distribution centers, high-rise residential, I've managed to build very productive teams, and I plan on keeping that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that question, and this will go to Mr. Kleinhans first, What prior work experience and education qualify you to be an assessor? And have either of you ever assessed any property? Mr. Kleinholz.
Well, I have a MBA from one of the top business schools in the country that has to do with real estate and finance. As a real estate broker since 1985, I've valued hundreds of properties. My previous experience at the Prudential Insurance Company of America as vice president, I was involved in acquisitions and sales of office buildings and hotel shares, residential high-rises, distribution centers. So I have extensive experience in pricing properties in the real world, what people will actually pay for them. So I have that baseline experience to bring the practical world into the rather regulated world under the Board of Equalization, the Revenue and Taxation Code, and of course the Constitution for Prop 13. So all those experiences suit me very well in providing valuations of properties. When you use the word assessed, if I'm taking that in the context of the role and the function of the assessor, no, I have not assessed property, but I valued it, and I've lived by that, so I've made my living. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Bouchard.
I have been a certified general appraiser for, let's see here, 30 years now. And that is the top of the appraisers. It's certified by the state of California. There's residential certified, and certified general. As long as I have the knowledge or find and prove that I have the knowledge, I can appraise any property in California, not just homes. And I do not do homes typically. I have done many homes. And as I mentioned, I constructed many homes, and I deal with many appraisers. I started in 1984, I started a federally chartered national bank. And let me see here. I'm going into my closing here now. Anyway, I had the bank for 10 years. It was merged. I managed all of the assets, the employees. I was the main director on of the bank. I was on the loan committee. I also, being a certified general, reviewed all of the appraisals that came into the bank. I managed assets of $75 million. And by the time the bank merged into another one, that bank had become a premier performing bank. And besides that, I do have and carry a real estate broker's license. I have appeared before other assessment appeals boards, which you may not know at this time what that is, but I don't see you over there. I look at him. I'll try and pay more attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will move to another media panel question. This question will come from the union. And Mr. Bouchard, you get the first answer to this question.
I would like to ask a question myself.
Okay.
Of the reporter. I know that she's just a messenger of the union, but I prefer not to answer any questions from the union, as they have refused to announce my candidacy in the newspaper, nor have they given me an interview.
And that's your choice. If you don't want to answer them, you cannot answer them, but we're still going to follow our format.
Yeah, I'd sure like to know from the union one of these days what the problem is.
Right now, we're just going to follow our format. I'm certain you can talk to them after the forum.
Thank you.
Okay. And the union.
The job of the assessor isn't like a supervisor or a council member. They don't create policy in the same way. So my question to you is, should the office of assessor be elected or instead appointed? Why or why not?
That's a good question. The office of the assessor is a constitutionally mandated position in all 58 counties. And there's protections that come to constitutionally mandated offices. The sheriff's office, for example, is another constitutionally mandated office. And what that does is it affords that office protection from undue influence. And what can happen in certain situations if county coffers would be low, perhaps there's a pressure to raise assessed values, which would, of course, in the near term and the longer term, raise revenues. The assessor is not subject to that pressure because of the constitutionally mandated position. They cannot bear that. There's a lot of autonomy in how an assessor's office will manage their budget. The control that the Board of Supervisors will have is how much money. Here's your amount of money, and you now get to choose, as the assessor, how you will spend that money, where it needs to be allocated, how you can best allocate that to maximize the efficiency of collecting the data and running up with an assessed value. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Boucher, just so we're clear, you do not want to answer the question?
I can answer the question. I'd be glad to do that. Give me a second now, because I wasn't fully prepared, because I thought I wasn't going to answer it.
Well, it's up to you.
No, if I have the opportunity, I'd like to take it. The things that Ralph said have proven that this is why the assessor has always been independently elected in California by the voters of the county. So the position is not subject to pressure from any governing body or any county, city, school, or special taxing districts, as he's mentioned, to increase assessments in order to generate more revenue, which then, of course, directly affects the taxpayer. So I would not propose that it be other than nonpartisan and elected.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next, we're going to move to an audience question, and this is a two-part question. This will be Mr. Kleinhans will get the first answer. How much would currently unpermitted, unassessed real property improvements contribute to Nevada County revenues if they were added to the tax rolls? And would it be appropriate to use county's newly acquired drones to identify such properties?
Well, that's a politically charged question. First off, drone use, that's not allowable right now for even sheriffs in a life and death type of situation. Drone use, you're starting to impact other people's property rights. But that's a policy decision that would be made by the Board of Supervisors at a minimum, certainly not the assessor's office. If you're improving your property by law, you need to get a permit, and you're supposed to do that through the appropriate way. Permits are there for the reason of ensuring that your construction is to code for a lot of reasons, most of them being public safety and your own personal safety. So I think people should do that. Bringing people into compliance, that has been a challenge for the county since I moved here in 1995. There's been all kinds of challenges that come up with bringing people in that have made improvements that they have done. I'm always in favor of a carrot, and if you could provide some form of reduced capability for somebody that's done something and perhaps bring them in, everybody's better off. But that's, again, a policy decision beyond the assessor's office. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher.
I would not support that kind of action personally without deep thought. And as to how much would it bring in the county, of course, I have no idea because we don't know what's out there. I don't have access to drones flying over and when the sheriff's department looks for fields. But that right now, as I understand it, is a very hotbed of activity, and people are upset that the county is even talking about it. But I, as the assessor, would have to do what I'm instructed to do. There would be no personal thought about it. And I can express that as a personal opinion now because I have not been elected, but that's where I would stand on the issue.
Thank you. Next question from our audience. And this is to you, Mr. Boucher. Based on your knowledge of the present assessor's office, which functions do you think the office has been performing well, and which functions have not been performed so well?
Well, let me tell you that in 2014, the State Board of Equalization assessed the actions of the assessor's office. And it found 10 violations at that time of things they were not doing. They weren't technically violations, but things that they could improve that they should be doing. In 2021, just September of last year, they followed up on that item and found of those 8 exemptions, the appraiser's office had not done 4 of those. And I don't know about the other governmental agencies, but I know on the Assessment Appeals Board, which was required to get copies of that, which I'm on, I never got that. But some of the reasoning when it was answered back why these 4 things were not done was, well, it's budget. And budget is a very important item. But the auditor or the assessor's office gets someone from the chief executive officer to work with them on their budget, and all departments fight for that budget. So unfortunately, the defense was, we don't have the budget. If we get the budget, we'll implement the thing. And the people that suffered were the taxpayers that were affected by it.
Thank you. Mr. Kleinhans.
Could you please repeat that one more time?
I sure can. Based on your knowledge of the present assessor's office, which functions do you think the office has been performing well, and which functions have not been performed well?
There's a large volume of assessments that have come through the assessor's office over the last 2 years. Most of you in here know about the surge in real estate activity. Each one of those does require a lot of time, effort, and energy, and to do it properly, appropriately, and fairly. We also had Proposition 19, which passed just over a year ago, which triggered an incredible complexity of transfers. All those transfers were designed to keep generational wealth within families. Most of them are complex, and they require a lot of additional evaluation and analysis to do so. The assessor's office has 24 full-time people, and now 2 temps that have been granted more hours for this fiscal year. Because of all that the transactional nature of what's happened, it's very difficult to keep up with the workload given the current staffing. So fighting for budgets, people don't, in the county, the different departments don't fight for budgets. The process is quite different than that. You do have to persuade a multiplicity of groups and key decision makers in the county if you want to expand your budget or staff. And I'm the person that can do that.
And thank you.
May I do my rebuttal now?
Yes. Yes, you have 1 minute.
Yes, I use the word fighting because you can smooth talk it, butter it up any way you want to. But boy, those budgets are important to each and every division of the county, right on down to the people that work here. And it is not a simple process because it takes the county's departments, each takes a certain amount of time to prepare their budget. But come about Easter, that's about 100% of their time if they're available to do it. It's a very important item, and it shouldn't be overlooked. But well, that's the rebuttal to the question. Now, you want the answer to the...
Well, I'll give Mr. Kleinhans a chance to...
Yes, I would like to rebut that. I just completed a $44.6 million budget for 7 different business units of the sheriff's office, and we did not fight, not with anybody else in the county. We did have some discourse with our CEO's office and budget allocations, but it's all civil. It's a process, and you need to justify your expenses that you have, and if you need more than that, you can demonstrate it. The CEO's office is amenable to appropriate arguments. So it is complex, it does take time, and like I said, our budget that I just completed and presented to the subcommittee was $44.6 million, and it was approved.
Thank you. Looks like we have time for we're going to try to fit in one more audience question. I know our time has gone fast. This question will go to Mr. Kleinhans to answer first. Though the Office of Assessor is not a lawmaking office, what is your view of Proposition 13 and recent calls to reform or abolish it? Proposition 13 was passed by almost, I think it's 70% of the population in 1978, closely followed by, Proposition only put a limit on increases. Proposition 108 followed that by just a few months, also in 1978, to allow for a reduction. There were reductions in Nevada County following the 2011 real estate crash across the country. I think it's a really good way to keep people in their homes.
If somebody bought a home 25 years ago in wherever, let's pick someplace in San Francisco, and they paid $300,000 for it. Well, today that home's probably worth $2.6 million. That's $26,000 a year in roughly in property taxes versus the original amount of $4,000. If you live there, most people can't afford that kind of a swing and change. So when you purchase a property, you know what your property taxes are going to be, and you know what they're going to be for the foreseeable future. So that's a real positive for people to be here. Typically, properties transfer every 7 years, so the state does get a bump, significant bump, every 7 years in the property that's sold. So I feel Proposition 13 is an important thing for the citizens of this county and the state.
Thank you. And Mr. Bouchard.
I would agree that it is very important, Proposition 13, because prior to that, approximately every 4 years, everybody got a big bump in their taxes, especially in California. And it is a way of equalizing the person that's been there and plans to spend the rest of their life there as to the person that just bought it under the present market. The person that is living there does not want to pay based on what the guy next door just bought. And one of the things that I have learned on the Assessment Appeals Board is how do you explain to two neighbors why there's this big inequity in values. It makes it very difficult, and it was a hot item in 2013, and it's a hot item all the rest of the time. But I do support it because it does try to equalize things. There may be something that we can do that I would never do because I not in that position, but there may be something to do to help the situation of the people. One of the things that if you're a property owner and you're, depending on when you buy your house, you can file for a $7,000 exemption on your property tax, which is nothing nowadays. You go to the grocery store and you pay, outlandish things for food. And so the $7,000 based on homes that are now selling for $1 million are well into 1.2% approximately a year. And that's a big chunk of money because 100-year-old homes in other counties are selling well into the millions of dollars and above that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Kleinhahn's rebuttal.
Just one additional comment on that. The $7,000 homeowner's exemption is generally applied unilaterally and categorically. You will find that on your statement as long as you're the homeowner. You fill out a form when you purchase a property that says, yes, I'm the resident, I'm going to live here. And that gets processed by the assessor's office, and the exemptions are so noted.
Thank you. And Mr. Bouchard, would you like a rebuttal?
Yes, you're right. You have to apply for it, but that doesn't, my point was that $7,000 does not make it equitable compared to the property next door. And I thought that's what we were trying to do is establish some equality between the two. And that's why I support Proposition 13 because but I agree, there are very little things that you can do to, if at all, to save the property being appraised at its full purchase value.
Thank you. Because we got a little bit of a late start, I do want to offer our media panel an opportunity to ask another question. So with that, we will start with you, Bennett, and Mr. Bouchard, you will get the opportunity to answer this first.
Thank you.
I would like to know if you, as candidates, filed all the necessary campaign finance reporting forms.
As of this week, I just finally received from the Secretary of State my identification number for the campaign. And that was the third time that I had applied. The first time it was sent back to me with the check, and I never have received it to this date. I filed the second time, and I advertently left off the year 2022 after the campaign thing, and that's what has held up my registration number. But I have not reached the plateau of $2,000, which requires me to file a 410 form.
Then just as a follow-up, why didn't you file a form for 70?
I didn't have meet the plateau.
There's a Form 460 for any candidate that raises more than $2,000.
I haven't raised more than
Any
$2,000.
other candidates who do not reach the $2,000 are required to file a Form 470. That is in the FPPC rules and regulations, and that form was due on April 28th.
I have no answer to that. I didn't file the question, the form.
Thank you. And Mr. Kleinhans?
Could you please repeat the first question so I get it clear?
Have you filed all the necessary campaign finance reporting?
To my knowledge, yes. I've hired a professional firm out of Sacramento that specializes in treasury items and compliance with FPPC rules and regulations. To my knowledge, I have filed everything I'm required to do.
And thank you. And our last question from the media will come from the union. And Mr. Kleinhans, you will answer this one first.
Why is it important to have the Office of Assessor separate from Auditor, Controller, Treasurer, and Tax Collector?
That's an interesting question because at one point they wanted to commingle some of the different offices. It's sort of like I feel that this is a bit like if you put them all together, it's the fox guarding the hen house. Because the auditor controller is supposed to be separate from the treasurer tax collector. The treasurer tax collector collects all the money and safeguards it within guidelines for safety and security and return. The auditor controller manages the outflows of the money and compliance with rules and regulations on the inflow of the money. So the person writing the checks doesn't reconcile the bank accounts is what that means. That's standard and normal separation of function in any auditing situation, government or private. The assessor is a separate, completely separate, has no function like keeping the money, getting a return, or writing checks, or putting in place the controls on the money flows and who gets what. That's a completely separate office. And as I had mentioned previously, it's a constitutionally mandated office. It's recognized as needing to stand alone without undue influence from any other organization.
Thank you. And Mr. Bouchard?
The last part of his answer was that it's constitutional, means that to change it, it's that simple. You'd have to change the Constitution. That's the whole answer to the question, as I understand it.
Thank you. Okay, now we were going to move to our closing statements. And to begin, we will hear closing statements first from Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you. I would categorize the role of the assessor as technical, administrative, and of course political, but not equals. The official qualifications for the two of us sitting here are we're 18 years old, a California resident, registered county voter, no disqualifying felony, and by the time by 30 days after elected, we have a valid appraiser certificate issued by the State Board of Equalization, which is not the same as the Board of Assessors in the state. That's it for one of the most important and toughest positions of Nevada County. I don't know if you're aware, but 1, 2, 3 of the last 5 assessors walked away or resigned. Of 24 since 1850, 14 did not finish a 4-year term. 6 assessors served 1 plus or minus year. My experience is broad with fulfillment and concludes a founder of a California nationally federal chartered bank opened in 1984, as I mentioned, and I served on that as director of the board until the bank's merger in 1994. During this time, I was responsible, among others, for the oversight of its investments, appraisal reviews, the loan committee, employees, management of the bank's real property and assets of $76,550,000 rounded. And as I mentioned, during this tenure, it became a rated premier performing bank, which was the reason for the merger because somebody else wanted it. My first appointment in the county was unanimous and is still current and was by the Nevada County Board of Supervisors in 2017, a trustee of the public-owned Nevada Cemetery District with 27 cemeteries under my care. It is now the only public district entity in the county that stands year after year financially on its own. The Assessment Appeal Board is a state-authorized tribunal adjudicating disputes between the assessor's office and the property owner. It has the authority rule of the assessor's to rule for the assessor's office, the property owner, or determines its own independent candidate. I have been chairman of that tribunal since 2012. Prior to that time, it was an annual rotation.
Thank you, Mr. Boucher.
Thank you.
And now we will go to Mr. Kleinhans. Mr. Kleinhans, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. As we've already talked about, the Assessor's Office is a constitutionally mandated position. The oversight of that office does come from the State Board of Equalization, and they don't have very high standards that you have to meet, as was already outlined. I have a significant level of education and experience above those minimum standards. I have the kind of experience and knowledge that will benefit the office and continue to benefit the county. In our ever-changing economy, timely and accurate assessments reflect the changing markets and are required so that there's never going to be an undue burden on the taxpayers. I'm committed to upholding Proposition 13 and all other tax relief measures that are available to property owners. I do want to speak a little bit about our assessor's office. The current assessor, Sue Horn, has been in that office for 12 years and has served the county faithfully for that 12 years, facing many challenges, and was a supervisor before that. I'm also pleased to be able to say that Assessor Sue Horn has endorsed me for this campaign and for this office because she feels that I do have the experience, skill sets, management knowledge that will best benefit the office. I'm seeking the office of assessor because I do have the necessary skill sets, the knowledge, education, training, and experience in both private and public sector work to be effective. I've been valuing property for more than 35 years, and it's actually what I like to do. Your help and support are critical in bringing my management skills and valuation expertise to the Office of Assessor. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who came out tonight, and for those of us, or those that are listening or watching online, or maybe watching this at a later time. Will everybody please join me in a round of applause for our candidates tonight?
Thank you.
And with that, I'd also like to thank our media partners, Nevada County Media, the Union, and Ubinet for being here tonight. And please, everybody, have a safe night. Thank you.
Thank you all.